Hi everybody, my name is Paul Sargent and I'm here to talk to you about the historical thinking skills that you're going to have to master here as you take an AP history class. And I'm going to break it down into some short videos that go over each category of thinking skills. And there are 4 categories and a total of 9 skills that you're going to develop over the course of the year. Now hopefully your teacher will take these kind of one at a time and work through them with you so that you understand how to do them and how they're going to be assessed as we go along. But let's take a look for now at the first set of historical thinking skills. Alright, so the first thinking skill is called analyzing historical evidence and sources. And basically what this is this is really what historians do. Historians take a look at primary and secondary sources and break them down in order to try and get a better picture of what happened. So here are the 2 thinking skills that are involved. Now, thinking skill 1 is called content and sourcing, and really this is what we do with primary sources. When historians look at primary sources, they don't just read them and take them for granted and sort of say, well, it's written, it must be true. They take into account not only who the author is, what that author's point of view might be, the time in which it was written. A memoir written 20, 30, 40 years after an event might be less reliable than something that was written, the day after an event. And so they're going to take all of those context clues about what they know about the document, plus the tone of the document and what it says, and they're going to try and develop an idea of how reliable and useful that document is. You're going to be asked to do the same thing. And so, for example, if you're studying industrialization, you're going to be presented with documents by workers and by business owners. Now, business owners obviously are going to have a vested interest in government kind of staying out of their business. And so they're going to be more likely to say that conditions in the factories are fine during industrialization. Now, workers, they're going to want government to step in and try and rein in the conditions of factories and stuff like that. And they might even exaggerate or overstate some of the dangers and some of the difficulties they have on the job. So the job of the historian is try and find what really is the truth, so to speak. Now, whether there's an actual truth, that's a whole nother discussion, but there are differences of opinions, and the more primary sources that you can get your hands on, the better. And so you have to look at primary sources and be able to check them out and understand so much about where they're coming from that you understand what the document's all about. Now, skill 2 is called interpretation, and this has to do with secondary sources. Now, secondary sources are written by historians or journalists or other people who are pulling together primary sources and trying to make some sense of them. And we have to understand that just like a primary source, a secondary source is affected by the personal biases, beliefs, and time period of the person who's writing it. So historical interpretation of the past, of past events, changes over time, so that different historians will interpret an event differently as they relate it to the time in which they live. And so you also have to be reading secondary sources and be able to understand the motivations of historians and how historians might be interpreting those events based on their own experiences and the time in which they're living. So primary and secondary sources are going to be huge in this class, and I'm hoping that your teacher is going to literally bombard you with primary and secondary sources throughout the school year, because the entire test is going to have primary and secondary sources that you're going to need to understand and be able to interpret. So that's it for now. That's the first of our 4 historical thinking skill categories. Stay tuned for the next one. My name's Paul Sargent. Thanks for watching.